Now, real people, real opinions. Nighttime talk with Niall Boylan.
Ireland's classic hits radio.
It is Niall Boylan, which will write you to 12 midnight tonight. By the way, have you ever thought, are we the only ones out there? You know, this little rock floating around in the middle of the universe. I mean, it's infinite, isn't it, when you go out into the solar system? And we'd be a bit naive to think we're the only ones. You know what I mean? Wouldn't we? There was a story whether I read, or part of a documentary, and I think about 30 years ago, they sent out this binary coded signal into space. I don't know who they are, by the way, some scientists. But seemingly, they received back a message. Now, they can't uncode the message that they got back. I think it was the same message, just with an error on it, personally speaking. But they received back a message. I'm thinking it was probably some sort of super intelligent alien sending back a message going, oh yeah, there you are. Well, don't worry, we'll sort you out. Anyway, but they did get back a message. So, did you ever think about, is there anybody else out there? Do you believe in ETs, extraterrestrial life? Could us humans be the smartest species in the universe? Because here, maybe we're not thinking about it properly. When we say there's no life on Mars, there's no life as we recognise life. But maybe our understanding of what life is very different to what life might be. I mean, our life form consists of a body, a human being of flesh. But maybe different life forms are just light or sound or, I don't know. Anyway, we'll talk about that. It's kind of head wrecking, isn't it? It's a bit of head melting. Anyway, we'll talk about that a bit later on anyway, right? Also, by the way, I have a very interesting guest tonight. Very interesting. As well as knowing all about philosophy, she's into tantric sex. Yeah, I said the sex word. When Irish people say sex, by the way, they always go, sex. They always kind of silence the word, don't they? It's like, when two ones meet in the middle of the street and they're talking about the young one down the road who's got pregnant. It's always like, did you hear about your woman down the road? Yeah, she's... Anyway, so yeah, we will be talking about that later on. And some of you probably don't even know what it is, but hey, you'll find out later on. But first, you can't have avoided, pardon me if you've been listening to the news, and I don't know why there's this kind of big surprise or this shock or this, the Taoiseach and Minister for Education and all, oh, we're horrified at the report, oh, we're shocked at the report. But we've been saying it for years. For years, people have been coming forward saying they were sexually abused in schools. We talked about the abuse, the physical abuse in schools for years. Why are they shocked? Why are these reports shocking? And by the way, to read the detailed stories of people who have made allegations are horrendous. When you hear stories like some poor kid is talking about that he was in a dorm in a boarding school, and this Christian brother would come in at night and go from bed to bed, sexually assaulting the young boys. I mean, that is shocking, but why are our ministers and our government shocked? Because we've been telling them this for years. And I suppose the Irish Independent headline today, molested, stripped naked, raped and drugged. The shocking testimonies detailed in report on alleged sexual abuse in religious schools. Now, I talked about it earlier on today, but it was so important, I believe it's really important that we continue to discuss this. Because the more we talk about it, I think the more we understand it. And the more we can think about how we can change the future so this kind of stuff doesn't happen again. And they go on to say, anyway, 4 chapters in the shocking 700-page report on historical sexual abuse at religious schools in Ireland start with a content warning. These chapters, by far the most harrowing and the most distressing, are the accounts from those who endured and survived extreme sexual violence and abuse in day and boarding schools across Ireland. The scale of the sexual abuse revealed in a landmark report published yesterday was staggering. The report, which was written by Senior Counsel Mary O'Toole, contacted 73 religious orders that ran or are still running schools in Ireland. Over 40 had records of historical sexual allegations, so they had records of them. They knew about them. The schools knew about them. Across 22 counties in Ireland. And the report said that sexual abuse happened between the 1960s and the early 1990s, with the biggest number of reported incidents occurring in the early to mid-70s. Who would have thought? The records also revealed a troubling high prevalence of alleged abuse in special schools. Wow. Taking advantage of vulnerable children. They're sick, twisted individuals. Let's be clear about this. with 17 special schools recording 590 allegations involving 190 alleged abusers. Sorry that we have to use the word alleged all the time, by the way. That's sad that we're using the word alleged. It's almost like we just don't believe the people. After combing through the records, the report found that 42 religious orders had combined records of almost 2,400 allegations of sexual abuse at 308 schools. The allegations were made against 884 people, many of whom were priests or teachers in positions of trust with constant access to vulnerable children. The stories are really difficult to read, by the way, in the report. And of course, this is not the first report of abuse in Irish schools or by the clergy, that we have already paid out millions in compensation to victims from previous reports, their cases. But as far as I remember, the redress on those previous reports, there was a time limit of, I think, 2 years. There have been calls now, of course, for more redress. The Minister for Education said the hope, basically, the church and the religious orders better put their hand in their pocket. The government is determined, they said, that any redress scheme for survivors of historical sexual abuse in schools will involve substantial contributions from religious orders. Good luck with that. As somebody mentioned today, the religious orders are great at getting tooled up legally to make sure they pay as little as possible. A redress scheme has not yet been agreed. Speaking on Tuesday, Norma Foley said the religious orders should be prepared to pay part of the bill. But does it really make a difference, paying out money? I mean, it still happened, didn't it? But here's the thing. Somebody did send a message to me today and said, Niall, why do they need to bring out these reports? Well, look, they are reports of investigation, and I get that. They said because all it does is re-traumatise people again. We know this was happening. Why can't the government, or why couldn't the government just admit it happened, set up redress in the first place, and then have people come forward privately, give their accounts, their allegations, abuse, check it, make sure it has corroborating stories? Because here's the problem. Many of the individuals that the allegations are made against are dead. So we've no way of dragging their sorry asses to court to prove what they did or to make them pay for what they did or embarrass them or shame them. So they're dead. But what we can do and what we do in these situations is if you have corroborating stories. So if you have 10 people making an allegation, 10 people who don't really know each other too well, haven't seen each other in 50 years, making allegations against one individual, well, then we couldn't be wrong, could we? Chances are slim that you're actually wrong. And some of the stuff that, I've talked about with people over the last 24 hours in relation to this, what's shocking is, and somebody mentioned it today, actually, I was talking to a journalist from the Irish Independent, and he was telling me that, Eno Doherty, sorry, I do apologise, Eno Doherty went out of my head. And Ian was saying to me, what was shocking was that in the schools, there were teachers that came to the children and said, don't turn your back on him there, watch your back there with him. You know what I mean? About other teachers. But they didn't say it to all the students. They said it to the ones they liked. In other words, other teachers, just like when we heard when priests were abusing people, where bishops and other people knew that they were doing it but said nothing. Other teachers knew there was something going on but said nothing. And I'll give you an example. The college that I went to, De La Salle College, Raheny, was mentioned in the report. I think there was one alleged abuser and 4 allegations, as far as I remember from the report. You can go online, by the way, and you can see if your school was on it, by the way. The whole report lists all the schools, how many allegations, and how many abusers were in each school. De La Salle or Art School comes up quite a lot, as you can well imagine, because they're Christian Brothers. But I remember going in there, and I'm not too sure whether this guy is dead or not, so unfortunately I can't mention his name. If he was dead, I'd mention his name. But anyway, when I went in, I was only in first year. And I remember everybody saying, don't walk up the stairs in front of him, about a particular Christian brother. I went, what? I was 12 years of age. Yeah, don't walk up the stairs in front of him, he'll feel your arse. And that was the truth. So, and there were teachers who would say that as well. He was well known. He even had a nickname, which I'm not going to say, but he even had a nickname. Because it was known that that's what he did. And here was the other part of it. Who is to blame for all of this? I mean, okay, these were predators, these individuals. Sick, twisted predators, right? But we let them away with it. The state let them away with it because it was handy for the state, because the Christian Brothers and the religious orders were educating the population. The state didn't have to do anything apart from throw a few quid their way every now and again. The state knew what was going on. The Minister for Education at the time would have probably known. But our parents probably had an idea. Because I remember, like many parents at the time, now they wouldn't have had an idea to the extent, but your parents would say to you things like, if you were bold, and don't be bold or I'll send you down to Artane Boys School. So they knew Artane Boys School was a dodgy place where bad things happened to kids. So parents knew where the bad schools were, or the schools that were probably primarily affected. Not all of them, obviously, and not to this extent. So we were all kind of culpable in this, to some degree. More so the predators and the people involved. But the question I want to ask you is, does it help to bring out reports like this? Does it make a difference? Does it finalise it in people's minds that eventually we're vindicated because we know that it's happened? Maybe nothing will ever happen to all these alleged abusers. 190 alleged abusers in one situation. 2,400 allegations, 308 schools. I mean, would it make a difference? Let me know what you think. And maybe you've been through that situation, and not just with sexual abuse, physical abuse. And the reason I mentioned physical abuse was, according to the Irish statute books, after 1982, corporal punishment was illegal in this country. It was made illegal. As you know, in 2018, you couldn't hit your child anymore because we made it illegal in the home as well. But up to that point, people said, but sure, it wasn't illegal. It was illegal because the law stated quite clearly under common law in Ireland, which we had, that a parent or a school teacher, the same law applied to both, could use reasonable chastisement. Now, reasonable chastisement meant maybe bringing you up to the front of the class, holding out your hand and slapping you with a ruler 6 times. That's kind of reasonable chastisement. Probably at the time. It wouldn't be done now, but at the time that would have been considered reasonable chastisement wasn't baiting you senseless. Reasonable chastisement wasn't what one Christian brother did to me when he would hold his fist so tight. I can still see it as I look up at it. And his fist was purple because his fist was so tight and his tongue was sticking out. And he would punch you in the shoulder or punch you in the stomach. Or the other Christian brother who would grab me by the lock and drag me around the class and slap you across the face. That wasn't reasonable chastisement. That was physical assault. So why did we ignore that at the time? Why? Let me know what your thoughts on this is, by the way. There's no particular question. The number is 087 188 0008. 087 188 0008. Do the reports serve a purpose? Let me go to Joanna first if I can. Joanna, hi. How are you doing?
Hi, Niall. How are you?
Good. Joanna, do these reports serve a purpose when they're telling us something we kind of knew already?
Do you know something? The thing about it is right, these paedophiles, basically, that's what they are. They were known to families and they were welcomed into their homes. And that's the badness of it, really, is that they trusted, the family trusted the priest and let them into their home and groom their kids. And as well as that, if the child was to come out and say something different, the child would be probably battered for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just the reality of it. That's the way it was, I suppose, in them days.
Well, you thought you could do nothing about it. If they were grooming you in school or whatever, you daren't go home to your parents and say it.
You would naturally think like, that's the priest, he's good, he's going to look after us and we'll go to heaven, blah-de-blah-de-blah. And he's going to look after our child and make sure he gets the best of everything, whatever. And he's coming in for, tea and scones in the afternoon and whatever. And he's abusing your child. Mm. I mean, and if you were to turn around and say, Daddy, he's doing something wrong to me, you'd be like, don't be talking like that. And you probably get a slap around the head for it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's just the way them things were. I mean, and for all the abuse that's been given, they are wealthy. The priests are wealthy. All the land and all they have.
Well, the church are wealthy. I don't know, but the individual priests wouldn't be wealthy, but the church is wealthy. It's a wealthy organisation. Yeah.
Sorry, no, that's what I meant. Yeah. They should be stripped of that. And whatever money comes from that should be given to the people that have been abused. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that money would ever make things right or make it better.
And you
But
are
it's
right.
this
Look
restitution,
at the
you know,
money that's
it's-
in these private colleges, and most of them are mentioned, by the way, because it wasn't just public schools; it was private schools too,
Yeah.
Blackrock College and places like that. And the
Yeah.
amount of land with rugby pitches and all sorts of. So they have a huge amount of
Absolutely.
wealth. They're the biggest landowners in the world, actually, the Catholic Church. So they have a huge
Well,
amount
the
of
least
wealth.
well, I think the state should just literally, they shouldn't even have a choice. They should be just stripped of that and give it to retribution for the people that have been hurt
Yeah.
and abused. Their lives have never been the same. I mean, I just think they shouldn't even have a bloody say in it.
I mean, when we talk about this and we talk about sexual abuse, which is
I know it
horrendous,
doesn't
right?
work that way, though. You know, I understand that.
But what I'm saying is, when we talk about, I mean, like when I read some of these reports today of the sexual abuse, it was actually horrific to read, right? But in saying that, there was also the physical abuse too, which obviously not as bad, but still destroyed people's lives. And I remember one particular guy, and he was so badly physically abused in school, and they constantly picked on him all the time because the teacher just didn't like him, right? That he ended up leaving school when he was 14 years of age because he hated school so much, he was terrified to go. He then, unfortunately, went down a life, of abusing drugs. He went down a life of, not getting a good job, not having relationships. So it just, destroyed his life.
Before I had children, Niall, I was a nurse. And I worked as a nurse, and this is before I had my children. And I remember one guy coming into A&E at night, and he was after being hit around the head with a plank of wood with nails in it.
Oh God!
All because he was a priest, but they realised that he was a paedophile, and nobody deserves that, no matter what, anyway. But still, that was the reason for that was. Now, I'm going back now. Oh God, I'm going back about 20 years ago now. And yeah. And I
so
thought,
basically his past had caught up with him, and the individuals that he had abused had basically taken their own revenge, which is not what I would suggest people do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but still, two wrongs don't make a right either.
No.
But, I remember that, and I was just, all of a sudden, I kind of went, well, he deserved it, and then I thought, no, he doesn't deserve it, and then I thought, he do, that kind of way.
Yeah. Do me a favour, stay there for a second, Joanna. Let me just go to Anthony as well. Anthony, hi, how are you?
Niall, how are you?
Good. Anthony, the report is shocking. I don't know why the government are telling us shocking, because we already knew about that, but generally when you're reading the stories, they are quite harrowing.
Yes. But I find it hard to believe, that the Minister for Education, I've been working in education and it's shocking to me.
Yeah.
Enablers, to be quite honest. They knew well what was going on. Like I said earlier on, I went to Greenmount School in Cork, and it was one of the most infamous industrial schools. And what's left of it now, the brothers left what was left of it, the Presentation brothers left what was left of it as a community centre. And there's just a little quarter of the land. And it was actually the only working farm in the middle of Cork City. There was like tractors going up and down the street. And I remember going to the school, the old industrial school. It was like a bomb site in the 1980s when I was going to primary school there. And there was this magnificent monastery and grounds and everything, and acres and acres of land. I couldn't tell you how many acres. And it's now turned into a housing estate, and it's Deer Park. But the horrors that went on there, and
well, it was named, Greenmount was named in the report as well, by the way. Yeah.
Yes, it is. And I'm not going to name anybody or any brother or whatever. And
by the way, can I say something? Obviously, Connor, our producer, is telling people not to mention people's names, right? And
no.
What I'm going to say to you, Anthony, is I would love to do a show where everybody can come on and name everybody they want to do, but unfortunately, we have the law against us in that situation. So, and it's sad that we can't mention their names. But some of them are dead.
No,
and some
no,
of them are alive.
I would never dream of that, Niall.
Yeah, no, I know, but I
You
feel,
know
but I do feel bad when we have such a harrowing report and people's lives being so badly affected.
I feel bad,
and these guys, mainly guys, get away with it. You know what I mean?
I feel bad because I was only 7 or 8 years of age, and Greenmount School was absolutely massive. And you'll probably hear from other people from Cork that went to school there as well in the 80s. And behind it, there was this big, magnificent monastery, red brick monastery, and would be a listed building, but it was knocked to the ground, and it's knocked to the ground to this day. And their grounds and their property and everything, and the Daya, anybody from Cork will tell you about that. That was where we went to play sports, play hurling or whatever. And behind that, though, behind the monastery, was like a boarding school. And you'd see these children would be walking down the driveway outside the school, and you'd be up at, like, it was a 3-story building, and you'd look out the window and you'd be told by the brother, don't look out the window, don't do this, don't do that. And it was like children of the damned. They were walking down with their heads down. But when you're 7 or 8 years of age, Niall, like I was at that time, you kind of thought, this is a bit weird, but will we let it go? And we were looking at the bomb site of the old industrial school next to it, because they built a new school in the early 60s. And 4 of my brothers went to it before me. And I attended the new school, and there was this brother X, came in with the back cape, more or less, and Diegwit, had to take the roll call. Dies Merigwitis Broderick a Braher. We all had to stand up and say every morning. And my God, I saw, and the meter stick came out, and corporal punishment was abolished at that stage. That was 1987, 88. They were still doing it.
But that was illegal. So did nobody report it? Because it was made illegal in 1982. The laws were brought in 1982 to ban and abolish corporal punishment. Did nobody report him at that stage? Because that was assault.
No. And we didn't know. We'd go on nature walks then, because the land was so vast. Like, I mean, they had a farm. They had a working farm in the middle of Cork City. And Greenmount School is absolutely notorious. And still to this day, it's the community centre now in Greenmount in Cork. And when you walk into the door, the little bit of the Victorian building is left. And Greenmount Industrial School, and 1870-something. And you just kind of think, oh my God.
Why do you think, Anthony, I am surprised that we're surprised at this. When we've seen the Klein report, the Murphy report, and all the reports in relation to clerical abuse, I'm surprised we thought it stopped at the door of churches. Now we know, obviously, it happened in schools too. And we knew that anyway. But why do you think that mainly, now there obviously was lay teachers involved in this as well, and parents too, obviously, abused children too. But why do you think primarily when we look at these stories, it's men of the cloth, messengers of God, these people who are given a real position of trust? What is it about them? What was the problem with these guys that they felt that they could do this to children?
I think it was too much power. I really think it was too much power, and I just think, particularly in Greenmount School, like, that was vast. It was a working farm as well in the middle of Cork City. You could be, like, I was in the middle of Cork City, and you could see a tractor driving down the road. There was a pig farm. There was everything. There was acres and acres of land, which is now Deer Park. There was a new road built in between it.
I know the area.
Massive housing estate. And You know, like that road never existed. It was a bomb site. When I was growing up, there was the ruins of the industrial school, which was absolutely like torture. The men and the boys that went through there.
And it must have affected their lives, obviously, going forward, because it does, it does affect people's lives. The trauma of living with that, being physically beaten or physically sexually abused or whatever it is that happens to you in school. I mean, of course, that's going to have a massive effect on your life.
And I think, like, Niall, to be quite honest with you, and a lot of people, there'll be other people that there is a course. There was 40 of us to a class.
That's right, yeah.
Like at the time. And then in the late 80s, all of a sudden, the Presentation Brothers were going, and this was that was it, and that was it, and that was it. And my teacher, they did take on lay teachers. They were clever enough. They had women to teach you in junior infants and senior infants. And
Well, a lot of them did take on lay teachers later, Anthony. The same in my situation, De La Salle College. The lay teachers started to come in because, of course, they were running out of Christian Brothers because they were slowly dying off and nobody was replacing them because nobody wanted to join the orders. Anthony, stay there because I want to go to Valerie before the break if I can. Because Valerie, hi, how are you?
Hey, Niall, how you doing? Hi, Anthony.
hi, how are you?
I mean,
You sound lovely to be listening to.
yeah, I mean, he described it. You could almost sense it and walk down that kind of lane with him, couldn't you? You know?
Big time.
Yeah, and it was almost like with these schools, particularly with the boarding schools and industrial schools, it was almost like a military exercise for children to be walking up and down, you know, and with their heads down the way he described it. Valerie, in relation to these schools, Anthony kind of summed it up well by saying they had too much power. Was that the problem?
Well, there's that and the fact that they decided that, you know, they wouldn't have sexual urges. You know, they decided...
That was celibacy, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is not natural. It's absolutely no excuse, but I think anybody that says that and follows that life, then that is not natural. It's not human nature.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and, you know, back to power, Anthony, and money, and I suppose the reason that they won't marry is because of nepotism. Because if they have children or a wife, then they'll have to divide up the wealth.
Yeah, they get inheritance.
Yeah, yeah. And now there's no answer to it. And there's, oh my God, I'm so, so sad again. Another report of another generation of small people being abused and disrespected and destroyed. And still we have the Vatican. We still have these people, these men, walking around very rich. Now, wearing really stupid clothes as well, but that's beside the point. No children, no wives. So does that mean that there's no sexual urges then? Are you like gods? You don't represent God, obviously, but they're still getting away with it.
There's no such thing as a man, as long as his body is functioning properly, not having sexual urges.
100%, Niall.
Yeah.
And I don't care what anybody says.
It's human nature. It's
that.
testosterone. It's human nature.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's biological.
Yeah.
So
And
why
when
do they...
when corporal punishment was illegal, they still carried it on. They still carried it on. The meter stick came out, and I saw people beaten, whipped with the meter stick. I really did.
How is that even possible? I mean, how is that a memory for you? How dare they?
But here's the thing, Valerie, let me tell you the story. 7 years ago, we were talking about another report, I think at the time, about physical abuse of children in schools. And and I decided at the time, that's why I'm shocked, but I'm shocked at the Minister for Education and the Taoiseach saying today that they were shocked at this report, because what's shocking about it, we knew it already. Anyway, so here's the thing. I rang up, I got a phone number from one of my primary school teachers who had a reputation in the school. And I decided to give him a ring and see would he come on the show. and explain why he thought it was acceptable when he was in his 40s to hit children, who were 7 or 8 years of age, and to hit them with he used to use the dowel of a baby's cot.
Isn't it awful, lads?
Oh, I know. But here's the thing, right? So I spoke to him on the phone, and he was quite subservient, and he says to me, "Oh, you're doing really well. I listen to you on the radio now, Niall. I remember you when you were young." And anyway, so here's the thing. I said to him, "Will you come on and talk to me about it? Why you thought that was acceptable?" And he said, "I regret everything." And I said, "Well, why did you do it?" And he said, "Because everybody else was doing it at the time."
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
That was his reasoning, because it was okay to do it, so he did it.
Yeah.
Like if I turned around tomorrow and said it's okay to kill women, does that mean every man should go out and kill women? No, because morally we believe it's wrong. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, and on his argument, Niall, would be, and we can go back to the Nazis or whatever regime.
Oh, I was just following orders.
Did terrible things. Yeah. It's no excuse again. Go on, Anthony, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt you, but Niall, I have to say, Greenmount School was rebuilt, and like I told you, my 4 brothers were before me in the old Greenmount School, and the new Greenmount School was rebuilt, and it was so purposely built in the 1960s, and there was connecting doors because there was the population was so vast at that time. There'd be 40 to a class, and there was connecting doors. The teachers knew
Anthony,
there was actually connecting doors.
Can I ask you, Anthony, when you say Greenfields, was that a boarding school, is it? Or
no, Greenmount.
Was it in...
No, it was just a day school, Oh,
day school.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there was a boarding school behind that, and they were the children of the damned, and we weren't allowed to look at them.
Oh,
if we looked out the window at them...
Different stages of, tiers of abuse,
And I think when I heard about it today, I kind of disturbed and brought things up in my mind. And I thought, but when you're 7 or 8 years of age, you don't know, you're just told, don't look out the window, look out the other way. And I looked up, and I was up on the 3rd floor in Greenmount School, and I was looking down at St. Finbarr's Cathedral, and one brother said to me, what are you doing? What are you doing looking out the window, looking at the cathedral?
Yeah,
and
that's
what did I just say?
Everything else.
What did I just say? He said to me, what did I just say?
I mean, just for clarification, by the way, in relation to Greenmount School, according to the report, it detailed 5 allegations of abuse against 3 alleged abusers at the Presentation Brothers School, Christ Ri, now Bun School, Christ Ri, and 4 allegations of abuse against 4 alleged abusers at the Presentation Brothers School, Mira, Nana Grass National School in Greenmount.
Grass, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I have to go to Emmanuel just quickly before I go to the break. Emmanuel, hi, how are you?
Hi, Niall. Yeah, I just had if I could just make a quick point about a wider level about Ireland as a violent society. If you look at our history, we had terrible violence in our history. The foundation of the state was violent. The whole imposition of Catholicism in Ireland was violent as well, because we didn't have any space to develop a secular state. But I can just move into the topic for tonight, which is the issue of celibacy. I actually think that celibacy, voluntary celibacy is probably okay, but enforced celibacy, you could see it as an abuse of a person to say that they can have no sexual life, and they have to agree to that as a part of an employment. Because if you like, priests are employed by the Vatican, and if you had a term of employment in any other company in the state and said that you can't have any sex during your life, this would be profoundly attacked by everyone.
Well, it'll be against your human right. It'll be against your human rights. Yeah,
such a good point.
I think, for example, a lot of the priests who are in the Catholic Priests Association, if one of them was to take a case to the European Court of Human Rights or the United Nations and say that the imposition of celibacy on any human person is an abuse of that person, and it's also a denial of one of the most natural aspects of their personality, which is essential to our personality. So in other words, abuse, for example, take our other senses, hearing, speech. Say I said to you that I can employ you provided you block your ears and you don't listen to anything for the next 10 years. That would be considered highly abusive.
Yeah, but there are people who take a vow, within the religious orders who take vows of silence, for example, and it would be a difficult case to take, Emmanuel, because they will claim that it's not a job, it's a vocation. You know what I mean? So
yeah, but they're still
employed.
Paid
they get paid,
and they're paid health insurance, and so from the point of view of human rights, I would say that it's an unacceptable term, whether it's a vocation or otherwise, because you're kind of using it as you're denying people access to a spiritual life if you say that if you don't agree to this, you can't enter the priesthood. So you're actually denying them access
so valid,
to church and spiritual life.
I mean, and I understand the point you're making, and many people make that point. When you demand somebody doesn't have sex, they then have to have sex in secret because they don't want to get caught and lose their job or lose their vocation. And they usually, or well, a lot of the time, and we've seen that throughout the world, they pick on children because they think children will keep their little dirty secret.
Well, I mean, this is my point. The denial of sexuality for a person is a term, whether it's for a vocation or whether it's a position of employment, is a term that I believe is antiquated and medieval, and it's also it's actually an attack on because I understand that God gave us sexuality as a part of our creation. So if that's a part of our creation by God, how are they able to deny that to some human beings and not others?
Mm-hmm.
And then also can go into the history of the church is much more serious level of violence in terms of the Spanish Inquisition, which lasted 200 years, was horrendous in terms of torture and abuse and so on. So the church has a history of abuse. It's not just about children. I mean, a lot of women in Ireland could tell you stories about how they weren't treated properly by the Catholic Church.
But that doesn't. And I know I understand what religion has done throughout the years. And by the way, religion and religious orders have been very good to people throughout the years. I don't want to discount that, by the way. But some of the religious orders have done some great work abroad and great work here in Ireland. And you could argue that without the religious orders, we wouldn't have had an education system because the government clearly seemed incapable of putting one together. And a health service as well at that point too. But Emmanuel, that doesn't excuse, say, the violence. Leaving aside even the sexual assault, and it's hard to leave that aside, and the rape and everything that went on of these young boys, primarily boys, by the way, the violence, when these Christian brothers, and by the way, I'm not excusing lay teachers who are, animals as well, some of them, but, these Christian brothers or priests or whoever they were, these orders, and the violence that they would, that we would see on a regular basis in the classroom, the way they would treat children. Where did that come from? Because it's not in their DNA.
Even your topic last night about the Irish language, the British used a lot of violence to stop us speaking Irish. And then the state introduced violence to force us to speak Irish. So they actually took over from the British by using force as a method of learning your own language. It's beyond belief. You couldn't make it up. The Christian brothers in an attempt to beat the language into us, ended up beating it out of us.
Okay, well, do me a favour, Valerie and Emmanuel. Please just stand there, stay there. Thank you, Anthony, by the way. Valerie and Emmanuel, stay with me. I've got to take a quick break. I want to get your thoughts on this, by the way. Why you've heard Emmanuel and Valerie's, theory of this, that obviously celibacy had a huge amount to do with it. That, it's unnatural to suggest that a man be celibate against his will, unless he particularly wanted to be celibate. But I don't think most of them do. And somebody wants to point out in the text, now, there are a lot of good priests. Well, why can't you say that? I've said that a couple of times, by the way, already. There are a lot of good priests, and there were some good Christian brothers. But sadly, these reports don't make for good reading. The number is 087 188 0008. Do the reports do any good? Do we learn anything from it? Or will this happen again in 30 years' time? Will it be something else? Will we be hearing about some other mistake that we made throughout history? Somebody else texts in and says, now, why do we keep focusing on the past? Why not focus on the future? We know about the mistakes of the past. Okay, that's your thoughts on it. Try to tell that to the victims. The number is 087 188 0008. Just before I go to Joe, maybe Emmanuel, you can respond to this. Somebody sent in a text and says, the sexual appetite for minors has nothing to do with celibacy. Not all of the clergy who failed to obey the vow of celibacy are rapists. Some of them went on to have affairs with women, which wasn't illegal. The priesthood is optional, and any candidate knows that entering the seminary. Is that a fair point?
Yeah, but you see, it's a fair point to some extent, but if you look at the number of abuse cases and the number of schools, it's actually frightening. It's way beyond what you would expect, if you could even expect any of that to happen. So
from you mean it's way beyond what it would be disproportionate to the general population?
Yes, it's disproportionate in terms of and in particular 2 schools, I understand there was 50 cases. So, I mean, it's obvious that people who don't have a sexual life can end up going into perverse directions, as you said earlier about, the denial of their sexual life. Sure, you couldn't make it up. It's so ridiculous. And even if somebody is voluntarily, they may at some stage in their early life, in their young life, they may be high-minded about spiritual life and so on, and join the priesthood, and then find themselves locked in to a way of life to which they've got used to. They don't want to go off and get another employment. They like the spiritual dynamic of the life as a priest and so on, and then they end up lonely, and there's all types of issues around that. And as I say, I actually believe that if they had some kind of a normal sexual life, that they wouldn't be, they'd be less inclined. I'm not saying that there aren't paedophiles. Of course,
rapists are rapists, and they'll still be out there. Yeah.
The dangers increase. The dangers increase when people are denied their sexual life.
Well, hang on, just before I go to Joe, because it was Marion who sent in that message, and Marion is there. Sorry, Marion. Do you accept Emmanuel's answer?
I only heard a part of the man's answer, but very, very few adults have a sexual appetite of minors. It's nothing to do with that whatsoever. And I would say I do have a friend who was sexually abused by clergy. So it's not that.
Why does it seem from the outset, when you see these reports, why does it seem disproportionate to the general population? We know a tiny percentage of men have some sort of sexual appetite, or they're paedophiles. They have a sexual attraction to children. But when you look at what's happening, what happened in all the previous reports that we've seen in relation to children, and now this report and many others, the Klein, the Murphy, and all the Fair and all the report, it seems to be a disproportionate amount of people within the clergy. I'm not saying all the clergy; it's a small percentage nonetheless. And most clergymen are good people, right? But it does seem to be disproportionate. So why?
To have a sexual appetite for a minor could be influence. It could be
power. Is it not about power, Marion? Is it not about they did it because they could?
Yes, rape, but Niall, we all know that in regards to rape of anybody is to do with power. That would be central to it. But a sexual appetite of a minor is very few people or adults have a sexual attraction to children, to minors. That has nothing to do with it. Like we had the likes of Bishop Casey go on to have affairs with women.
There's allegations have come out about him now as well by his own niece or granddaughter.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that's recent allegations about him. But say Father Michael Cleary's another example. Others did go on to leave the priesthood.
I know, many priests had affairs on the side. We're well aware of that. And Emmanuel makes that point because it's a ridiculous notion to suggest that it didn't happen. That you force a man to be celibate for the rest of his life. It's a ridiculous notion, isn't it?
But you could say it's a ridiculous notion to expect a man to be faithful to his wife because he has his eye on more than one woman.
No, he's talking about the sexual aspect of it. He's talking about the sexual aspect of it. A man can't be married to his wife because I'm assuming they have an intimate relationship.
But it can also be used as an excuse. It's not enough, the one woman, etc. You have a sexual attraction to more than one woman.
Marion, I'm listening to Emmanuel and Valerie, and I'm not suggesting, by the way, that is the sole reason, right? But certainly it must be part of it. But I also believe the sole reason or part of the reason that this happened or why this happened was because these men, primarily men, nuns, by the way, abuse children too, physically as well. But these men had too much power, too much authority, and went beyond question. Nobody questioned.
No, I agree with you there. That's a different argument. It's definitely to do with power, and we're untouchable. And as you know, within circles of what would you say, sexual abuse of minors, it's got to do with power, and they're actually sick.
Yeah,
it doesn't bear thinking of.
Could I make a point?
Yeah, go ahead, Emmanuel.
Yeah, well, the problematic for the Irish state when it was established, there was complications about people's religious beliefs and so on. And the Catholic Church moved into the space where our secular independent state should have developed. And you had a situation where the state's deference to the church was of astronomical proportions. I mean, De Valera was kneeling down to kiss the Archbishop's ring or the Cardinal's ring. I mean, this is beyond belief, how we subjugated ourselves. I want to clarify in everything that I've said that there are wonderful people in the church, people of tremendous qualities, and the service they have given this state is magnificent. But there's no doubt about it that the church has a real big issue about sexuality, and they need to confront it. And, you know, they have been very abusive towards gay people over the centuries and caused vast amounts of deaths of gay people as a result of their attitudes. And I believe that they need to question themselves. For example, I don't want to go back to the 19th century, but you may be familiar with the castrati of what happened to the boys with the Vatican choir. I mean, the church has a history of using power against people and the whole problematic of spirituality. And then you had the breakaway of Protestantism where people felt it could be redeemed individually by their own efforts, whereas the church takes over people's spirituality and, if you like, represents them to God instead of giving them an individual relationship with God, which the Protestants, in fairness to them, they do support that type of idea.
Well, hang on a second, because I've only got about 4 or 5 minutes here before the news. I want to bring Joe in as well. Joe, hi, how are you?
Yeah.
How you doing?
Joe, I mean, yeah, like everybody else, you know, we're not surprised by these reports. It's not something we didn't know that was happening already, but it is still harrowing to read it all, isn't it?
It is, but we knew what was going on. Like, I left school in 74, and it was a boarding school. And, like, I used to see the straps that they used to hit us with in the window of the shop there beside the Progatives, the priest shops there, beside the Progatives. And they had special trousers made for the strap to go down into. It was about a 2-foot-long strap with a steel belt and a steel bar in it. And they used to hit us with that. Mm-hmm. I seen that up in the windows. So the church knew that it was going on. The church knew that. See, it was tough to control 400 kids in a school or 300 kids in a school, especially boys with the testosterone and all that. But not all the priests were bad. But some of them did take it to extremes.
Yeah.
Some of them did take it to, and some of them did enjoy it. And like I knew a few of them that enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And enjoyed hitting us and taking out that belt. And
well, that's what I said earlier on about the Christian brother that I was with. You know, that one of the Christian brothers, by the way, there was many of them. But when I used to, I remember because I was still small, and I can still remember looking up as he'd raise his fist to me, right? And his fist would be purple because he had it clenched so tight, and his tongue was sticking out. It was almost like it was like a game for him.
Yeah, so I remember coming into the class one day and I was late, and I said, "Thank God he's not here." And he was standing behind the door, and he punched me like a man.
Yeah,
punched me like a man would punch another man.
And see, people argue, but before 1982 that wasn't illegal. It was illegal. Of course it was, because the law, but even corporal punishment didn't allow for that. Corporal punishment allowed for what they called reasonable chastisement. You know, to punch somebody is not reasonable chastisement. Bringing you up to the front of the class and slapping you on the hand with a small ruler 6 times, that's reasonable chastisement, or certainly was at the time. But you know what I mean? But punching somebody...
But there was no rulers in our days. There was just the leather belt. And they used to hit us with it, and, you know, there was a steel bar in it. And I remember one...
there was one guy we had, and he sewed a 50p piece into the top of the leather.
Yeah. But they used to sell them, so the church knew, because it was in the church shop.
Mm.
So how did they not know that this was not going on?
But do me a favour, Joe, because I want to go to Johnny just quickly, because I've only got a minute before the news here as well. And Johnny, hi, how are you? Hello, Johnny.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, Johnny.
Hello, how are you doing?
How you doing, Johnny? You want to make a quick comment? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of this coming out at the moment, but, you know, about the priests and all that in the schools and boarding schools, but I was 11 years of age and I was in a national school, and I was left-handed, a kid dog, as we all know. Mm. And I was bet by a nun many times every day, and she tried to make me write with my right hand. And that wasn't going to work out. So she, as we all know, a kid dog writes quite differently. She made me write with a pen properly like a right-handed person. And today, as a result of that, my writing is not good. I write like a normal right-handed person.
Yeah.
And it has really affected me. You know, I remember I used to go home and I'd be afraid to tell my parents. You know, that's not, you know, it's a good
That was a thing.
Now.
That was a thing years ago, wasn't there? This, I don't know, maybe somebody who's religious can tell me about this, but wasn't there this thing that the devil had something to do with people who wrote with their left hand or some bizarre notion that they had?
Yes. But unfortunately, I was in a school in my local village, and it was an all-boys school, and I was taken out of that boys' school to go in the road a couple of miles to a brand new school where my parents thought it would be a better school for me. But unfortunately, that had a serious effect as I came into teenager and young adult life regarding drinking. Not drugs, but alcohol. And I drank a lot of that stuff because I never spoke to my parents properly about it. And it really affected me, you know, where I went down a road of you know, I was always working, but I went down a road of disastrous relationships and drinking because I kept this stuff bottled up for a lot of years until I got help and treatment with my drinking.
Yeah.
And I'm sober a lot of years now, and I'm in a program, and a lot of years of my life.
I'm glad to hear that, by the way, and I'm sorry you went through that. Yeah.
But it's the fact that I have my own daughter is 11 years of age now, and you know, when I think of, I mean, this nun, you know, she used to hit other young girls in the school as well. So, like, this stuff has really come up in me lately, you know. I mean, it's shocking what happened, you know, with the schools and boarding schools and all that. And I know plenty of people that went through all that abuse, but it had affected my life so badly for many years, you know. And I didn't realize, you know, over the years after that as I got older, but it all stemmed back from that when I was a young child. You know,
you are right, and there were.
That I was wrong.
I spoke to somebody today, and they said, you know, he got a few hidings in school. She said, didn't do me any harm, right? And I said, well, look, mate, didn't do you any harm. And I said, but there were individuals in my class who, for example, the teachers picked on a regular basis because they were a little bit more vulnerable. They weren't as good at learning, maybe. And what happened to those kids was, you know, they would hate school because they were terrified to go into school because they got a beating every day, right? And many of those kids left school early. They wouldn't even have done their group cert, as we called it at the time. And they left school early, maybe didn't get a good job, probably didn't hold down relationships very well, maybe turned to drink just like yourself, Johnny, because they felt they were useless, a lot of self-loathing and all that kind of stuff going on. I'm not a psychologist, but I'm sure it has a damning effect on people's lives. So, you know, it basically charters the course of your life.
Absolutely. No, I never brought this to a head, you know, and I've often, you know, thought, you know, should I go back into the national school, you know, look at the records of exactly the year and all that and, you know, make a complaint. But I just said I'd leave it alone, you know, but I've moved on with my life today. But, you know, you'll always go back to your childhood when you hear these kind of stories.
Yeah.
And it really, I believe it had a serious effect on my life the whole way through.
Yeah.
And thank God today it's not like that. But, you know, even when I moved on to secondary school that time, I mean, there was teachers hitting us with the ruler if we didn't know our Irish and all that stuff, you know, on the hands and the backside.
I remember that, yeah.
And you know, so, look, I suppose that generation there of, you know, that's the way it was with these schools. But, you know,
Why do you think, Johnny, just very quickly, because I've got to go into news, but when we talked to Marion and Emmanuel there a minute ago in relation to the sexual aspect and the sexual abuse and the rape of children, et cetera, and the power and the physical abuse, why do you think primarily it seemed to be a lot of people of the religious orders? Why do you think they did this? I mean, we can't get into the minds of these individuals, these evil individuals, but why do you think it was so disproportionate?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, you can get a lot of look, you were discussing it earlier on. I don't really want to get into that side of it, to be honest, because I don't know.
Okay.
You know, but
okay.
I mean, at the end of the day, you know, people's lives were torn apart, and you know, at the hands of these people, and it was, you know, and there hasn't really been anything seriously done about it over the years, you know, as it comes out, you know.
Well, look, Johnny, I wish you well,
So,
and I'm glad to hear, by the way, you're off the drink. Well done to you, by the way, and I hope.
Well, I'm off it a lot of years, but I just know that this is, as you said, low self-esteem, all this stuff.
Yeah.
Happens with people, and I'm not talking 40 years ago either.
Yeah.
So look, it's
a work in progress.
Unfortunately, that's.
Yeah.
But like as I said, I write like a normal right-handed person now, but my writing is very poor because of it.
Yeah. No, I understand. I completely understand that. Listen, thank you very much indeed for sharing your story with us. I really appreciate it, Johnny. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, Joe, Marion, and the News. Look, we know we don't carry the topic over the hour, but there's so many people interested and want to come on and talk about this. And we're talking about, of course, the latest report out, which suggests there's 2,400 allegations in 308 schools. Jeez, it's almost every school in the country, isn't it? When you look at the secondary schools, 42 religious orders. No surprise, really, although the minister seems surprised, and so does the Taoiseach. Why? People have been saying this for years, that children were physically and sexually abused in schools throughout this country, mainly and most prevalently in the mid-90s, or the mid-70s, should I say. And not only was it physical abuse, and let's not excuse teachers when we talk about, we didn't have corporal punishment banned until 1982, and we talk about the physical abuse. The physical abuse still wasn't acceptable. It was illegal, by the way, can we point out, before 1982. The law stated clearly in the law that they had an exemption, like a parent, for reasonable chastisement. Reasonable chastisement is not beating people. Reasonable chastisement is not making somebody sit on the left hand so they don't write with their right. Reasonable chastisement is not grabbing people by the hair, or, as Joe mentioned, punching somebody in the stomach. That's not reasonable chastisement. That's physical abuse. Reasonable chastisement is certainly not sexual abuse either, or rape. Let me know what you think. The number is 087 188 0008. All right, keep texting, keep WhatsApping. I understand for a lot of people, by the way, they're contacting us in their droves about their experiences, in schools, be they religious order schools or lay schools as well, by the way. A lot of them, by the way, let's be clear about it, a lot of the physical abuse and some of the sexual abuse didn't only go on with Christian brothers or religious orders or priests. There were lay teachers as well involved in this. They do mention that, by the way, in the report as well. But primarily the report seems to focus very much on the religious orders. Somebody says, now, how many allegations are in this? And remembering, of course, the allegations, 2,400 allegations of sexual abuse in 308 schools. Many of those would be multiple allegations against the same individual, which, can I point out, is a good thing. And I know you're going to say, no, how is that a good thing if it's all that amount of allegations against the one person? Because then it stops becoming an allegation. If you've got, say, 10 different people making an allegation against an individual, and they're 10 people who don't know each other, at different parts of the world, possibly even now at this stage they've moved on in their lives, well, then it's most likely true, isn't it? Whereas if you've only got one person making one allegation, it's their word against theirs. And a lot of the problem is it's difficult to prove now, because a lot of these priests or Christian brothers or indeed lay teachers are possibly dead. 50%, I think it's over 50% actually, according to the report, are probably dead at this stage. So, because, look, when I went to school, the teachers that were teaching me were kind of in their 40s at the time, or 50. I was only 7 or 8, so the chances are that they're all dead now. I could probably mention all their names if I wanted to, because they're probably dead. Somebody says, no, in relation to the Christian brothers that you mentioned earlier on, you can't mention their names, not just because they might be dead. What happened if their children are listening? Well, can we just make 2 points here? If they're Christian brothers, they shouldn't be having children. And they most likely don't have children, unless they had the children before they went into the order, which is unlikely. And secondly, you can't defame a dead person. We did have one case going back some time ago in the courts in Ireland. I think it was about 20 years ago, where the son or the daughter or something of a dead person tried to take a defamation case on behalf of somebody who had passed away on a radio station. Thankfully, they lost the case. Because if you could suggest that you can't, or that you can defame the dead, well, then realistically, you can't then talk about anybody from the past who is evil in any bad way without having some sort of convictions on them. That would be ridiculous. You can defame the dead, or you can't, should I say, defame the dead. Anyway, the number, by the way, is 087 188 0008. I want to just get your thoughts on, not are you shocked by this, because most people are kind of shocked and horrified by it, but it's something we knew was happening anyway. The number is 087 188 0008. How do we change the future? Make sure it doesn't happen again. Well, look, we have a lot of guidelines in place now. We've, guarded vetting. We've all sorts of rules around how you treat children. You know, if you're with children, you also have to have somebody with you at the time. You know, there's new guidelines now, you know, with the HSC in relation to, you know, our interactions with children. So we've put a lot of steps in place to hopefully make sure a lot of this sort of stuff doesn't happen in the future. That doesn't say it won't happen, by the way, because it can. Because people who are determined to interfere with children or rape children or abuse children or physically hurt children will find a way to do it if they really want to. Let me go to Martin. Martin, hi, how are you?
I'm very well, Niall. Good evening. Thank you.
Martin, what really just annoyed me today was the Taoiseach and the Minister of Education saying they're shocked by all this. When for years people have been saying this anyway, so I don't know why they were shocked by it.
Yeah, well, I have a couple of issues, if possible, I'd like to just put my point forward. But them claiming they're shocked, we all know that's crock, okay? That's nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
What they're doing is, in my opinion, they are taking the opportunity to push a subject and a narrative out there, knowing that a general election is very close. And basically what they're doing is they want to muddy the waters. They want to bring down a smoke screen, have people talking about this. It diverts attention from other issues. I don't believe anyone could say they're shocked by this, not having seen the things that went on in this country for years. I don't believe anyone who says they're shocked, unless they've been living in a cave for the past 40 years and never had any outside contact. I don't believe anyone could be shocked. On top of that then, if there is to be an actual deep inquiry, a deep dig inquiry, I think it will go on so long that everyone in the country will become exhausted by it. It'll be like so many inquiries we've had. At the end of it, no one will be held accountable. It will cost a fortune. But most importantly, I think that the victims will be victimized all over again, because it will bring up horrible, tragic, distressing memories for people. People will be asked to make statements. In my opinion, it will traumatize them all over again and make things worse, because I don't believe anyone will be held accountable. When it comes to, I mean, I never suffered sexual abuse in school. I'll never say that. There was never, and I was never aware of any of it. But like yourself, Niall, I was a few years ahead of yourself. And like yourself, when I was in particularly in primary school, I was in an all-boys school, and not in the junior school, but in the senior boys' school, it was all male teachers.
Yep.
And so now I'm not painting every one of them with the one brush. I had a few fantastic teachers in my time, but they were very few, in my opinion. Some of those male teachers were absolute demons. They were bullies of the worst sort. Pardon me. And this is what has set my kind of opinion of teachers. They were bullies. Some of them were bullies and, you know, physically abusive. There was one guy I had as a teacher, and he had a leg of a stool, which he called Leon. And Leon was used several times a day on several individuals in a class, myself included, numerous times. Now, he'd hit you on the back of the legs. He'd get you to turn over your arms so that your forearm was facing up. And he would bring that thing down with absolute vicious vengeance. Now, yeah, he was a bully. But I also think it was transference. Because what he was doing, he was transferring his ineptitude as a teacher onto the student and making out that we were all useless, we were incapable, we were worthless, when it was him that was worthless. He was worthless as a human being, and he was certainly worthless as a teacher and someone who was supposed to give an example to young boys who were supposed to grow up to be, you know, socially responsible, correctly brought up, mannerly young men.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I view him and a good many others. And I will never change that view. But it has set how I view teachers. Some of them are fantastic. but a lot of them were just inept. They never should have been teachers in the first place. Now what we're looking at with teachers, the vast majority of teachers nowadays, I believe, they're dedicated, but a lot of them, in my opinion, again, not all of them, but a lot of them, they're dedicated in the wrong way. They're not dedicated to actually educating children. They're dedicated to indoctrinating children. The things that are being taught, to me, it's equally. It doesn't traumatize people to the same. It doesn't traumatize children
physically.
To the same degree.
No, physically.
They don't. Yeah, they don't realise what's happening to them, so it's not traumatising them, but it's detrimental to them.
Martin, we spoke about the education system and the curriculum and all that kind of thing there the other day and the other night as well in relation to that, and we will talk about all that kind of stuff again. But I want to go back to the past if I can.
Yeah.
Why, as a religious man yourself, why do you believe primarily, disproportionately, it was Christian brothers, religious orders, nuns, whatever, priests who seem to be involved disproportionately in the sexual abuse and rape of children?
Well, I think it was because this thing about priests and brothers not being,
celibate.
The church would say they're not supposed to. Pardon? Yes, about celibacy. The thing is, the church put forward this notion of celibacy as the way for priests to live. Now, that all has to do with going back hundreds of years where the church priests were allowed to be married.
Was it the 12th century? I believe it was a man-made rule. About
that. What happened was, as priests died, their wives were getting payments, which was costing the church money. So the church decided, we'll stop this. We'll just stop priests getting married. Now, there is no scriptural.
No, there's no biblical reason for it. No,
absolutely nothing. I mean, I'm tired now, so I can't give you exact chapter and verse. But I think in Matthew, it's described how Simon's mother-in-law and Peter Simon was, or Simon Peter, depending on which way you would read it, whether Aramaic, Hebrew, or Greek. His mother-in-law was severely ill. And Jesus went for it.
He was married. Yeah.
There's absolutely no reason why a priest shouldn't be married, other than financial reasons that the church had. But what it did was it opened up an avenue, in my opinion. It's like asking, why would a mushroom hunter go looking for mushrooms in the woods? Because that's where you find them, and that's where these people found victims. They found them in schools. And because there was a tolerance, there was a kind of an allowance of, well, yeah, it can happen, but we won't talk about it. And it did happen. But I have to be honest now, I believe it happened to a high degree because there were other people who had vested interests. Their vested interest was either financial or their own culpability in allowing it to happen or in taking part in it and being afraid that they might be exposed if they spoke out against it.
But what was shocking, Martin, was, and even the school I was in, one of the individuals, who I'm sure is probably going to be the individual named eventually. I mean, they mentioned in the report that there was an individual with allegations against them. Everybody kind of knew. When you started in the school, the teachers, he had a nickname. And the other students would tell you when you were in first year, oh, don't walk up the stairs in front of him. You know what I mean? So everybody kind of knew about these individuals. They there was rumours. It was like the old kind of Jimmy Savile thing in the BBC. There was kind of rumours circulating about them. So why did nobody say anything? And as Eno Doherty said to me today, one of the teachers came to him and said to him, "Look, just a word of warning: stay well away from him. He's been known to, with kids and what have you." But he said he only told me because he liked me. He didn't tell all the other kids in the class about him, But he says, why didn't he go to the police?
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying now. I believe that most of the people who surrounded the actual perpetrators, they had a vested interest. It was financial, job security. Who's going to put their head above the parapet and be the first or possibly the only person to make we'll call them allegations or claims or speak the truth or whatever way you want to put it. If you're the only person and you don't have support, it's very difficult to do that. It takes a strong individual. It takes a person with moral character and a person of honour. Practically no one's going to believe a child. So even the guards at the time, the guards, there were numerous accounts of women who were in these mother and baby homes and the Magdalene laundries and all the rest of it, who, if they did get out, the guards took them and brought them back. I mean, it sounds incredible now when we talk about it, but a guard was not going to go against a bishop or a parish priest, because they knew that at the end of the day, the power brokers at the top wouldn't tolerate that, and a guard could lose his job. A headmaster could lose their job. Anyone could lose their job, whether it be in a school or in a convent or in a Christian Brother school or wherever. The people, I believe there were people who they had vested interests either because of their job security, or because they were involved to some degree in exactly the same practices.
I had a guard on the air an ex-guard on the air going back about 7 or 8 years ago. We were talking about the mother and baby home where I was born, St. Patrick's Home in the Navan Road, which is now gone. It's a housing estate. And he said to me that he went to his sergeant. This is back in the 1960s.
I remember you relaying this story, yeah.
And he went to a sergeant and said, there's something going on over there. I'm not happy with it. There's been complaints made, but yada, 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 yada. And his sergeant's answer was, you don't get involved in that. They look after themselves. We're not involved. We don't get involved in that. Leave it alone. In other words, ignore it. Forget about it. Doesn't matter what they're doing.
Yeah. That's exactly the way it was. That is the way it was. Thankfully, things have changed to some degree. There are still many problems. But, I took some fairly severe beatings, not for anything. I mean, when I think about, simple things like being caught talking or standing out of line, some of these people, if they had been in Germany in the late 1930s, early 1940s, they would have been right at home in a concentration camp. They really would. They would have settled in perfectly because they were psychopathic, a lot of them. Again, I'm not lumping everyone in together. I had a few excellent teachers.
As did I.
But those excellent teachers did not make up for the gaps that the psychopaths left, who had no interest in teaching me. They had no passion for what they were trying to teach. And when they failed at what they were supposed to be teaching, because the vast majority of the guys in the class, some just couldn't care, some that wanted to get on, whatever. The vast majority of the guys in the classes that I were in, with the same teachers who were bullies and thugs, we all felt the same. They weren't good teachers. They didn't teach it properly. And when they failed in their teaching, they took it out on the pupils.
Do me a favour, stay there for a second, Martin. I want to go to Tom as well. Sorry, he's been waiting ages. I do apologise, Tom. Tom, hi, how are you?
How are you, Niall? How's things?
Good. Tom, well, just give me your thoughts, I suppose. I'm not asking a particular question tonight. We're just kind of talking about these reports and, so it's stuff that we kind of knew already.
Well, as the last gentleman said, I agree completely. Anyone reading the report there wouldn't be shocked at what went on. Back around the 80s when I was going to school, and I left primary, went to Christian Brother School in secondary, and I was there for 3 years now. I couldn't wait to get out of it because I was hammered from pillar to post physically. I was never sexually abused, but some of the stuff that was done to me, Niall, you'd be locked up for it now.
Of course you would. And by the way, you should have been locked up for it in those days too, because it was illegal then. But just because we didn't have a ban on corporal punishment didn't allow them to do that, because under common law in Ireland, parents and teachers had the right to use reasonable chastisement on a child. But reasonable chastisement didn't mean beating you up.
It was absolutely dreadful for me in Ireland. Two brothers and one normal teacher. I was hammered by two brothers. One fella punched me so many times and so hard. I went home. I was sick. I was in hospital for 2 days with concussion.
Oh my God.
Okay. And I had to say to me father and mother that I fell, because I'd be afraid of saying that I was beaten by a teacher because I didn't answer a question probably, or maybe I wasn't an A+ pupil, but I wasn't bad either. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was 14 years of age and this fellow was hammering me against the wall, and I said to myself, I'm not taking this. I'm going to hit him back. And I knew if I hit him back, I'd be expelled, and that'd be worse for me.
Yeah.
But there was another normal teacher, Niall,
a lay teacher,
who had a brush handle. A brush handle. It was about 20 inches long, and he'd come down to you and he'd say, "Put out your hand." Did you put out your hand? And he'd say, "No, turn it around." And he'd hit you on the knuckles, and he'd hit you 3 or 4 times. The same teacher, one of my best pals in school, he pulled him from his desk by the hair and pulled him all the way up to the front of the classroom, was slapped him across the face, and there was clumps of hair taken out of his head.
Shocking, isn't it? When you think about this, these guys, they were mental cases. They were animals.
They were.
Yeah.
And do you know what, Niall?
But you know what I always think about too when I'm thinking about this, right? Like that guy that did that pulled that kid out of the desk right by the hair and brought him up the class, or the guy that punched you and put you on, essentially put you in hospital. Did they have kids themselves? And what were they like when they went home? Did they do that to their wives and their kids as well?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, were the schools putting out notices in the newspaper saying animals required? You know what I mean? Because how do you get so many head cases into one building?
Yeah. Yeah. And do you know what, Noel? If I had been brave enough to tell my father, I think my father would have went down to the teacher and he would have pulled him out of the class.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to take that chance.
No, and that's what many people said, yeah.
Kids,
yeah.
If it was my kids nowadays, that person wouldn't be standing, I can tell you that.
No.
It's absolutely dreadful what happened to the majority of people, the majority of young men in schools. I know what happened to ladies as well, but in the Christian Brothers, back around that time, it was mostly males and they were getting hammered, and it was on a regular basis. There was a lot of pupils getting hammered. And if there was a tribunal about corporal punishment and abuse claims, that it would shut the country down as regards the amount of claims that would go in.
Do you think that affected your life in respect of your education? Your education. How well did you do, like in your leaving cert or whatever, or did you leave school before that even?
I left after my junior cert. I got an apprenticeship, and I've moved up the ladder of life. But my confidence and my youth was gone. I was an angry man when I was going up through my teen years and stuff like that. And that would have been different, I think, if that abuse hadn't happened. It just made me angry. And the same teacher who pummeled me, he's still alive. I do see him on the streets walking by, and I just look at him, I bite my lip sometimes when I see him. Because if I get out of the car now or whatever.
It's terrible, isn't it? I know that feeling. I know that feeling. That you feel like you want to go over and just box the head off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I know.
And say, see how you like it, pal.
I couldn't do it to him.
I know. I don't endorse that. I don't endorse that behaviour either. Yeah. But in saying that, he obviously if he's to the fact that he's walking the streets, he hasn't faced any justice for what he's done.
No.
But so here's the thing, and as I said earlier on, when I spoke to my primary school teacher on the phone, and I said, would you come on the air and talk to me on the daytime show? This has gone back a good while ago. And I said, look, no judgment. I just want to know why you did it. And he said, I regret it, yada. But he said, I'm not coming on the radio, he says. But he said, look, all I'll say is, he said, everybody else was doing it. It was just the thing.
Yeah, that you're in both defence now.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Yeah. We were just following orders. Yeah. But they were the reason they did it, Tom, was because they could, and essentially they were allowed to do it.
The fact that he said everyone else was doing it, an apology might have went some way towards some type of repair there, but you won't get that. You won't get that from a lot of them now. They just deny it and stuff like that. But it's just there was an awful lot of people getting physically abused, and my heart goes out to everyone that was abused. But like a lot of people got hammered physically, and my thoughts are with them because it affected me, and I'm sure it still affects some of those today.
Mm-hmm. And again, both yourself and myself and Martin are talking about, physical abuse, which was horrible for a lot of people. But when you read the reports of the sexual abuse, literally drugging children and raping them, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's dreadful. Niall, can I just say on that level? I mean, I was very lucky. Within a few years of, I left. The day I did my intercert, I walked out of that school. I walked out of the secondary school. I have to admit now, I didn't have a lot of physical abuse in the secondary school, but there was a high degree of, I don't know if you'd call it emotional abuse, but certainly teachers were quite fond of putting us down and calling
humiliating.
us
Yeah, humiliating.
Humiliation. Now, I was very lucky in that within a few years of walking out of that school, I had a very good employer. I was trusted by that employer. I was working by myself with a very responsible, highly technical job, travelling all around. I think I said it to you before. I learned more about humanity, society, science, everything. I learned more in the couple of years after I left school than I had learned in the previous 10 years. Because when I got out of Ireland, I saw that things aren't the same elsewhere. Now I'm not saying everywhere else was perfect. Pardon me. But what I'm saying is I realised things weren't the same. So I wasn't left with the same indelible scars that people who have suffered sexual abuse.
Martin, do you think when we look primarily at it, it is disproportionately Christian brothers and priests and what have you, right? Particularly in the education system at that time. Do you think it was the fact that we allowed too much power? We just allowed them too much power?
Yeah. I do. But again, I come back to, yes, they were allowed too much power. But for me, it still comes back to there were people who had vested interests, either financial vested interests or they were afraid that they themselves would be exposed. And even if they weren't exposed as people who are perpetrating the same acts, their financial interests and their societal interests would still be affected if the truth came out, particularly when it came to religious orders. They had so much power. I can't remember who it was, but I remember a guard being interviewed on the television years ago when I was in my probably early 20s, maybe mid-20s, when there was a television for me. But I remember a guy talking about a bishop. I can't remember which bishop it was. And the bishop was travelling from, I can't remember, we would just say it was Dublin to Cork. And the bishop was hungry, and he got his driver to pull in at a Garda station. And he went in and literally demanded, I want tea, or I can't remember what it was. What food have you got here? And the guards were running around like idiots, literally waiting on this geezer hand and foot, because that was what was expected. If that bishop, I can't remember who it was, so I'm not going to use a name. I can't remember. But the story it is true. I remember hearing this guard being interviewed. I mean, this guy had so much power that he knew that if he went to the local superintendent and said, I was travelling from wherever to wherever, and I pulled into such a station because there was nowhere open to get something to eat, and one of your sergeants told me to get stuffed, that sergeant would be in trouble. Absolutely. He'd be in such trouble.
Oh, yeah. Why didn't you have the tea and biscuits ready for him? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
and the best cutlery. Listen, lads, I have to wrap it up. I've run out of time. Tom, thank you for sharing that, by the way, with me. And I hope everything is okay now, Tom. I know these things kind of dwell on your mind every now and again, particularly when you see stories like this in the paper. They kind of come back. It kind of brings it all back to you. I know that, Tom, because...
It does, but it's good to talk about it as well and to listen to other people. It's a little bit of a vent.
Yeah,
absolutely. Bit of event.
Absolutely. Listen, Tom, thank you very much indeed. And thanks, Martin. Thanks to everybody who got involved in the conversation. But just the headline really sums it up in the Irish Independent, in fairness. And it says, molested, stripped, naked, raped and drugged. Shocking testimonies detailed in report on alleged sexual abuse in religious schools in Ireland. Anyway. Look, it's not the end of it. We'll be talking about it again, I'm sure. And we'll be talking about it again in 10 years' time. And we'll be talking about it maybe in another 10 years. And then hopefully at some point in the future, we won't be talking about it anymore because we will have so many guidelines in place that kind of stuff won't be able to happen again. Although, look, there's people out there, individuals in society, paedophiles or whatever they happen to be, who will always find a way to do things. You know what I mean? They just will. It is shocking. And look, by the way, if you feel, that you've been really badly affected by the physical abuse that you got in school, right? And you feel that's really affected you in some way in your life and you've been really damaged by it, report it to the police. Just report it to the police. Make a statement to the police and tell the police what happened to you. Because remember, this excuse that corporal punishment didn't come in till 1982 is nonsense. Because that only stopped what they called reasonable chastisement. Before that, we operated under the common law system. And under common law, I was reading it there today, the parents and guardians and teachers had an allowance to use what they called reasonable chastisement. Punching somebody, grabbing somebody by the hair, all of that kind of stuff that's been talked about on the show today, sexual abuse, rape, none of that is reasonable chastisement. So if anything like that happened to you in school, please do report it to the Garda Síochána. They will take you seriously, by the way. Please do report it, because the more reports that go in about certain individuals, the more those stories corroborate, and it helps everybody. Anyway, and look, you may not want to get involved. You may want to leave it in your past, and that's your choice too.
Now, real people, real opinions. Nighttime Talk with Niall Boylan.
Ireland's Classic Hits Radio.